care to allow inspections of the mail-in ballots. There was no inspection.
The battle for Pennsylvania continues, with the Trump legal team continuing their fight for what's right amid alleged voter fraud and mail-in ballot problems. President Trump vows the election is far from over. Well, to show you this as well, the president tweeted yesterday about Pennsylvania and voter fraud. It says this, quote, "We should look at the votes. We're just beginning the tabulation stage. We should look at these allegations. We're seeing a number of affidavits that there has been voter fraud. We have a history in this country of election problems," end quote. Now, Twitter put a disclaimer on this tweet. It says this claim about election fraud is disputed at the very bottom there. All right, joining us now to weigh in on this is Pennsylvania Representative Guy Reschenthaler joining us live. Congressman, always good to see you. If we can, let's show his race really quick. I just want to say congratulations to you. I know that you won your race as well, defeating your opponent here, 65% of the vote there to the 35% of William Marks. I know you saw a lot of success. Congratulations to you on that. I want to jump right into this one here. The voting systems that were tabulated, the Dominion systems. There's a lot of talk about this, Congressman. What do you know? What have you seen in Pennsylvania about the possibility of these Dominion voting systems switching names, switching ballots? What have you heard?
Sean, first off, thanks for having me on. Please, as always, just call me Guy.
Sure.
Let's look at Pennsylvania right off the bat. We know that there is voter fraud that occurred. Now, how much, that is a question that will be fought out in the courts. But statewide, you had our attorney general and our governor basically guarantee a Biden victory, saying when all the votes are counted, Biden will win. We also know that just in my district alone, ballots were sent into my district that were already pre-filled out, straight Democrat voting line. If you look in the Sean Parnell-Connor Lamb race, you had two huge treasure troves of ballots that were found that were overwhelmingly almost 100% filled out for Biden and the Democrats. That's a swing district. Statistically speaking, that is a near impossibility. In Erie, going up north in the state, you have postal workers that claim that their superiors were backdating ballots that were coming in. And then in Philadelphia, of course, you had the fact that poll workers or poll watchers were not allowed access. When they were allowed access, they had to stand well away from well over the 6 feet requirement, and couldn't actually watch the votes be tabulated. And we know that on election night, President Trump was up over 500,000 votes. I believe it was about 674,000 votes. The fact that this lead has been eroded to basically 0.5%, very suspect. And just one more thing while I talk about the stats. You had two statewide row offices. Rarely in Pennsylvania did they go Republican. We picked up 2 statewide offices, and yet we didn't win the presidential. Statistically speaking, that is abnormal. That does not usually happen in Pennsylvania. Plus, we lost 0 seats. Congressional seats in Pennsylvania. The numbers just don't make sense.
Yeah, the down ballot becoming a split ticket there. That is a big question, too. Another question really quickly with you. Pennsylvania's history of voter fraud. There's a lot of allegations about things that happen in Pennsylvania. Give our viewers just an idea of what you've seen, what you've heard.
Well, voter fraud here is constantly an issue, whether you're talking about downtown Pittsburgh or whether you're talking about the Philadelphia issue, just something that you have to overcome. We know that there were individuals that were dead that miraculously registered to vote and mailed in a vote. We also know that in some precincts, we're being told there was over 100% voter participation. We're still working to confirm that, but clearly that would be indicative of voter fraud. So we know that we have to usually overperform as Republicans in a lot of these areas to win come election night. I'm excited to see where this lawsuit goes because, again, if there was voter fraud, we need to know about it. And for every illegal ballot that is counted, it dilutes every legal ballot that was counted. So we've got to fight this vigorously. And if we don't call the Democrat machines out on this fraud, then in future elections, they'll know they can get away with it. Yeah. And future Republican presidents will be undermined.
Guy, I got a few seconds left with you.
I believe there's about 90,000 votes still in Philadelphia, in Western Pennsylvania and Westmoreland County. My district, last time we checked, there was about 40,000 votes. I'm not sure the exact number, but we're talking about a Biden lead by less than 0.5 percentage point. And I think that when you start going to court, knocking out these mail-in ballots, which are the vast majority of the ballots get knocked out in legal challenges, that lead will narrow and narrow. And hopefully President Trump will knock out these illegal ballots cast and prevail in Pennsylvania.
All right, we'll continue to monitor that. A lot of developments. Congressman Guy Reschenthaler, Republican from Pennsylvania. Guy, good to see you. Thank you.
You too.
Tens of thousands of ballots were filled out for Joe Biden and no one else. No down-ballot candidates. Does that sound right to you? We're going to ask our panel about it right after this. Welcome back. Since Tuesday, we've been keeping a close eye on the irregularities and inconsistencies we've seen in numbers during this election cycle, including the unusually large number of votes that went to Joe Biden and no other candidate on the ballot. Here's Attorney Sidney Powell breaking it down.
There has been a massive and coordinated effort to steal this election from we, the people of the United States of America, to delegitimize and destroy votes for Donald Trump, to manufacture votes for Joe Biden. They have done it in every way imaginable, from having dead people vote in massive numbers to absolutely fraudulently creating ballots that exist only voting for Biden. We've identified at least 450,000 ballots in the key states that miraculously only have a mark for Joe Biden on them and no other candidate.
Sidney Powell says more than 450,000 votes for Biden and no one else. How common is that? Isabel Brown is the spokesperson for Turning Point USA and a conservative Gen Z commentator. She joins us live. Also welcoming in Bob McEwen, a former Ohio congressman and former House Intelligence Committee member. Good morning to both of you. Bob, I'll start with you because, you've run for public office. How typical is it for voters to only vote for one person when they cast their ballot?
Well, Emma, when you think about mail-in balloting, think of ballot stuffing. When you vote absentee, as many of us do, you identify yourself, they identify you as a registered voter, they see your signature. This idea that came up in California in 2016, and the Soros organization has been pushing it, and we saw it now in these 5 states, in which mail-in balloting is where you throw it out to everybody, and then you harvest them in at the end, and you ballot. That's why you quit counting at midnight, so that you knew how many votes you need to get. And then the next day, lo and behold, you have 138,000 here just for Biden and nobody else. It's just modern day ballot stuffing. And the idea that you would only vote for the president and nobody else is so transparent that I think anybody can see what happened here.
Yeah, Isabella, I'll ask the question to you too. Have you talked to anyone who voted for Joe Biden and didn't bother filling out the rest of the ballot?
If that is happening, I certainly am not aware of it firsthand. And I also would love to point out that this year in 2020, people are so invested in what's happening in local politics, largely because of the COVID-19 pandemic. People have been very interested, maybe to a degree never seen before, in who's running for city council, for mayor, for state legislatures, as well as for Congress. So I think the likelihood of these many hundreds of thousands of ballots being filled out just for former Vice President Joe Biden in these key swing states is astronomically low.
Well, it's not just the fact that so many people also voted for Biden. There are questions that the ballots were not properly checked. Here's what the former Attorney General of Nevada, who's working with the Trump campaign, had to say.
In particular, the Clark County Registrar went with a machine called the Agilis machine. And at least 200,000 votes were counted through the signature verification process of this machine only. I will repeat for the media, no human beings looked at those signature matches to confirm they were in fact matches.
Bob, I'll go to you. How serious are these developments?
It's absolutely, the president has every right and responsibility. This has been planned for some time. You notice the large states like Ohio, where it was not close, or in Texas or in Florida, that we didn't have this problem. It's only the states where they could actually make the difference, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, that's where they quit counting at nighttime, and then it came in with all of these artificial votes that just are too transparent to see exactly what happened. Why would you, and when the whole world is waiting, and you know that your state is on the bubble, why would you throw up your hands and just not count on election night? You would only do it in corrupt places like Wayne County, where they have 14,000 dead people already that they've discovered in Detroit. You would see it in Wisconsin, in Milwaukee. You would see it in Philadelphia. those places that knew what they had to do the next day was to find out what was the final tally, and then they need to find enough votes in order to put him over the top and then make the electoral college difference. It's very critical that this not stand.
I mean, we're still pointing out that the votes are still being counted, and Newsmax has not called the outcome of the presidential election quite yet. Isabel, respond to the breaking news we got this morning. Some good news, in fact, from Pfizer saying that their coronavirus vaccine is more than 90% effective. Overall, some great news, but some are expressing some concern and skepticism about the timing of it all. Don Jr. wrote on Twitter saying it's pretty amazing, nothing nefarious about the timing of this all, right? Weigh in on that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
As a scientist by education myself, I am overjoyed to see this vaccine finally come to fruition and come to fruition with safety and effectiveness. I think that's the most important thing to be analyzing here. However, there is absolutely a political lens to view this through, and several people on both sides of the aisle have made a lot of statements about that on Twitter just this morning. For example, the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, gave a very interesting interview on television today saying that he's going to do everything in his power to prevent this vaccine from being rolled out in a safe and effective manner so that no damage, in his words, would be done because it was developed under a Trump administration. I think this twisting between science and politics is very, very concerning. And instead, it's time to halt this COVID-19 pandemic in its tracks. We know that this is effective. We know that this is safe, and it's time to reopen America.
Yeah, some great points. I know a lot of people waiting for that vaccine to totally get back to normal. We appreciate you both joining us this morning. Isabel Brown, Bob McEwen, thanks so much.
Thank you, Emma.
President Trump blasting the media for prematurely calling the election in Joe Biden's favor. On Twitter, the president posted this. He said, "Since when does the lamestream media call out who our next president will be? We have all learned a lot in the last 2 weeks." Joining us now to discuss is Mike Broomhead. He's the host of Morning Talk Radio 92.3 FM KTAR in Phoenix, Arizona, a major state we continue to watch here. And just to be very clear, Newsmax has not called the election for Joe Biden, pending the litigation and a lot of allegations about fraud and others. Good to see you. Thanks so much for coming on. You know, we started this segment, Mike, with these tweets from the president, and Twitter actually flagged several of the president's tweets about the election. We'll show you this. And as you see, I'm sure a lot of folks have saw it at home in that bottom part of the tweet there, you see it. And this is all happening all weekend. The social media company tagging the president's posts as potentially misleading. And Twitter's move comes as the president continues to raise concerns about election irregularities. What are your thoughts on this and Twitter coming at the president hard, especially in this past week?
Well, it's not surprising. We've watched this happen over and over again. It seems to be very one-sided. They've been called out by Congress over and over again. It doesn't seem like they're allowing for free speech. What they're allowing for is one side of the argument to say whatever they want, and the other side has to watch every word they say and how they say them, or they get flagged or they get blocked, and it just doesn't seem fair to anyone. But I think the president's message is pretty loud and clear. Even Lindsey Graham is saying they have to keep up the fight. So I don't think this is going away. The American people are pretty aware of what's going on.
Yeah, Ted Cruz, Kevin McCarthy, other GOP leaders as well. I want to point this out as well. A United States Postal Service worker in Erie, Pennsylvania, his name's Richard Hopkins, and you may have heard this, is claiming presidential election ballots received after Election Day are being backdated now to November 3rd by his supervisors. Hopkins has started a GoFundMe page. At last check, I believe it's raised $124,000, a little more than that. But these claims here, these anecdotes, whatever you want to call them, they are coming in around the country, specifically in these key swing states. What are you hearing? How do you think this would play out in a legal battle?
Well, here in Arizona, we were shocked on Tuesday night when Fox News called the election so early. But we're now seeing the gap so narrowed here in the state of Arizona. There's still just under 90,000 ballots still to cast. The president's only down about 16,000. He's closed the lead from 93,000 down to about 16,000. And what we're hearing here about the cheating in Arizona is there's a lot of questions. People have been told they weren't registered to vote after they gave the elections people their phone number or their actual number, voter ID number, and they're being told that their vote was canceled. So there's a big movement here to make sure every vote is counted. We can take a loss, anybody can, as long as we feel like it's fair. There's just too many people here in Arizona with too many questions.
Mike, what did Arizona think about Fox News calling Arizona so early?
I was shocked. I was on the air that night and left. And before I got home, Fox News was the first to call it. CNN didn't, MSNBC didn't, but Fox News did, and then the AP. We were shocked knowing how many ballots were left to cast. There were over 180,000 ballots cast on Election Day that were early ballots that were dropped off in Maricopa County. It was way too early. We still don't know what's going to happen in Arizona, and it's now almost been a week, and so we were shocked.
Mike Broomhead joining us live. Mike, thank you so much for your words. We appreciate your time, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Former New York City Mayor, the president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, joining us live in a new hour of National Report starting right now.
All right. There was a soundbite earlier from Andrew Cuomo, we've heard, a governor of New York, talking a lot on ABC a short time ago. He's really saying this. He's working with other governors to stop the Trump COVID vaccine rollout, claiming the administration's plan to distribute the vaccine through healthcare providers will, quote, do damage. A lot to talk about that as the big news came out from Pfizer. All right, good Monday morning to you. Welcome to a new hour of National Report. We're glad you're here. I'm Sean Kreisman.
I'm Emma Reckenberg. That plan is certainly not doing damage to the markets. I want to show you a live look at the Dow right now. It's way up on news that a potential vaccine from Pfizer was 90% effective in trials. But Governor Cuomo said that vaccine may be ready 2 months before Inauguration Day was bad news. Now, this comes as the Trump legal team disputes the results of the election in several of the key states. That includes results in states that Newsmax is not calling for either President Trump or Joe Biden. For the latest, let's bring in Newsmax national correspondent Logan Raddick live at the White House. Logan, good morning.
Good morning, Emma. And the Trump campaign is filing at least 4 to 5 lawsuits in key battleground states this week. Pennsylvania, along with Georgia and Michigan. According to our own John Gizzi, at least 80,000 votes cast in Gwinnett County in suburban Atlanta need to be rerun, recounted, and possibly re-adjudicated. And on Saturday, Republicans dropped a lawsuit filed in Arizona over Sharpie-marked ballots. But the Trump campaign announced it's filing a federal lawsuit in Nevada suing the counting of what it's calling illegal votes. And they say they have evidence that dead people and non-residents cast ballots in Nevada, and the president isn't giving up yet.
President Trump insisting he's the winner amid ongoing legal battles, tweeting, quote, "The observers were not allowed into the counting rooms. I won the election, got 71 million legal votes. Bad things happened, which our observers were not allowed to see. Never happened before. Millions of mail-in ballots were sent to people who never asked for them." His attorney, Rudy Giuliani, alleges widespread voter fraud in the Pennsylvania vote count, especially in Philadelphia.
From the very beginning, the mail-in ballots were a source of some degree of skepticism, if not a lot of skepticism, as being innately prone to fraud. With all that, you would have expected there'd be a high degree of security and a high degree of inspection that would be provided for mail-in ballots. Democrat officials here in the city that's been Democrat for 60 years and has a very long history of voter fraud, documented history of voter fraud, instead of going to a high degree of care to allow inspections of the mail-in ballots.
Former Director of National Intelligence Richard Grenell is helping to lead the Trump team's fight out west.
There's a 30-day residency requirement in the state of Nevada. If you haven't been in the state for 30 days, it is illegal to vote. Reporters have a responsibility. The fact is, we are filing this federal lawsuit to protect legal voters.
Outgoing Congressman Doug Collins will lead the Trump campaign's recount efforts in Georgia. The Trump team is doubling its group on the ground in the Peach State, and President Trump is planning to bring back his signature well-attended rallies, but this time with a focus on the ongoing litigation as he challenges the election results. He will reportedly read obituaries of dead people who cast ballots as part of, quote, specific pieces of evidence of what he claims is widespread voter fraud. The campaign is also denying reports that President Trump's senior advisor Jared Kushner suggested that he concede The president is doubling down, adding surrogates and lawyers nationwide, and his supporters are holding what they call Stop the Steal protests.
Recount, recount, recount.
While Joe Biden supporters are celebrating a declaration of victory.
Folks, the people of this nation have spoken. They've delivered us a clear victory, a convincing victory.
Biden is moving forward with a transition team despite a disputed race. Dick Morris, a former advisor to President Bill Clinton, tells Newsmax that President Trump can still win this election. He says only the Electoral College or state legislatures can declare a winner. And the GOP holds both houses of the legislatures in Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, key states in these legal efforts. Top GOP members, including Senators Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham and House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, are encouraging President Trump not to concede.
There are serious disputes about the vote totals, and there's a legal process to resolve those disputes. So at this point, we should allow the rule of law to operate. We should allow the legal process to move forward. And when that process is concluded, which it will be in a matter of weeks, we will know who prevailed in the elections.
While former Republican nominees like President George W. Bush and Senator Mitt Romney are urging him to move on.
And there's a battle going on around the world between authoritarianism and freedom. And it's important for the cause of democracy and freedom that we don't allege fraud and theft and so forth unless there's very clear evidence of that. And at this stage, that evidence hasn't been produced.
And while the election is contested, world leaders, including conservatives, are ready to turn the page.
And I look forward very much to working with President Biden and his team on a lot of crucial stuff for us in the weeks and months ahead.
Rudy Giuliani, who we're about to hear from, says the Trump team has enough evidence to, quote, change Pennsylvania, claiming hundreds of thousands of votes were completely invalid. And today, the Senate, still holding on to a Republican majority, returns to Washington with stimulus relief being at the top of the agenda. Busy day here in our nation's capital. Back to you.
Indeed it is. Logan Raddick joining us live from the White House. Logan, thank you very much.
You think we're stupid? You think we're fools? You know something? The Democrats do think you're stupid. And they do think you're fools. And that's why you get called deplorable and chumps. So, we're going to stick with this. We're going to win this election. We've actually won it. Just a matter of counting the votes fairly.
That is former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani last week launching a legal war on behalf of his client, the President of the United States. He joins us live right now. He's President Trump's personal attorney. Mr. Mayor, you are leading the president's legal team in disputing results from several key states. I want to show everyone, including Arizona, Michigan, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Nevada. What are you working on with this team this morning, and what's the game plan for this week?
Well, the game plan for this week is to first to file lawsuits. First one that we'll file is today in the state of Pennsylvania, challenging the entire vote in Pennsylvania on a number of grounds. Let me emphasize the fact that the fake media has for some time said there's no evidence. We've been putting evidence on television every day, including the day after the election. In this lawsuit, we have over 50 witnesses who will say that the vote count, particularly once the election ended that night, and President Trump was ahead by 800,000 votes in Pennsylvania, the count thereafter was unlawful. It was counted behind closed doors. Republicans were not given an opportunity to see any of the mail-in ballots as required by Pennsylvania law. Pennsylvania law requires that for a ballot to be valid, a mail ballot to be valid, it has to be observed by both sides. We have 55 Republicans ready to testify that they were uniformly corralled and weren't able to see a single ballot. They saw a lot of activity, but no ballot. Every one of those ballots that was cast, that was not examined, is now an illegal ballot, an unlawful vote. And it's in the hundreds at this point. That it's not just in Philadelphia, however. Precisely the same thing was done in Pittsburgh. The only difference is when a court intervened in Philadelphia, they didn't follow the court order, and our people were threatened with arrest if we tried to look at the ballots. whereas in Pittsburgh, halfway through, they allowed some observation.
So
the numbers in Philadelphia, the numbers of unlawful ballots in Philadelphia are about twice the number in Pittsburgh.
So
and
in
the Republican part of parts of the state.
Just to clarify, Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind, in Philadelphia, I just want to be sure, how far away were these observers kept? Is that the argument there, that they were too far away?
They never got closer than 20 feet, which made it impossible for them to see a single ballot. They actually tried to use binoculars, but then the people turned their backs to them. So even with the binoculars, they weren't able to see. This was a deliberate 2.5-day cover up of the ballots. In other words, this could have been done behind closed doors for how open it was. 20 feet away, you cannot see a small ballot. You can't see if it's 500 with the same handwriting, 300 in the same ink, 200 without any identifying envelope. You just see an envelope get thrown away. So in essence, and the most important thing is, the rules here are set by the state legislature. The state legislature demanded that these be done in the presence of Republican and Democrat inspectors. They were not done in the presence of Republican and Democrat inspectors. In fact, a judge in Philadelphia so ruled. And now we're taking it to federal court to declare those ballots unlawful, which they are, and invalid, which they are.
Yeah.
And once those are ordered invalid and unlawful.
Sure. So that's
President Trump wins Pennsylvania by the landslide he was leading with before they started to count these phony votes.
Okay, so I know that
Remember,
that
he was
will
leading. He was leading on election night by 800,000 votes. Mm-hmm. We have mathematicians who will tell you it is statistically impossible to have overcome that with the number of votes that were out there. They had to have created new votes in order to do it, and now we have the proof that they did. If these ballots were valid, there is no reason why they couldn't have been made available to the Republican inspectors.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, I want to move ahead
because
you've alleged other examples as well.
Oh, yes,
let's talk about one of them.
We also have a number of incidents, and they're growing. I think they're up to a couple of hundred right now, in which ballots were backdated. So a ballot came in marked November 4. They changed it to November 3. We have post office officials who were told to do that. We have election officials who were told to do that in several parts of the state, not just Philadelphia. The epicenter of the fraud was Philadelphia, which, of course, would be quite natural. There hasn't been an election in the last 60 years in which Philadelphia Democrats haven't cheated.
What about the Dominion voting system?
Joe Frazier, the ex-heavyweight champ, voted several times after his death in Philadelphia. Will Smith's grandfather
are there
has
also
voted
allegations
several times
about the voting systems, the Dominion voting systems as well? Do you have any update on that?
Now, the Dominion voting system will be the next lawsuit we do, which is well along now in Michigan. The Dominion voting system, literally in one county in Michigan, Antrim County, recorded basically a 2-to-1 vote for Biden. Since it was a Republican county, that seemed rather odd. And when they checked it, they found out that the software was faulty, and it was actually a 2-to-1 vote for Trump. Antrim was used in 3/4 of Michigan. So there is absolutely no basis on which anybody can have any confidence in the vote in Michigan with that Antrim software at the core of their vote counting. In fact, any place that used Antrim software would have to be seriously re-examined now. I mean, how could it be that a vote turns out 2-to-1 for Biden, and then when you look at the software, it's actually 2-to-1 for Trump? It happens to be a Canadian company, not an American company, and we are now seriously checking into that. But Michigan also, the votes can be disqualified because in Michigan, Republican inspectors were denied the opportunity to look at a single mail-in ballot. In other words, thousands and thousands of ballots were counted.
Right. Yeah, it clearly sounds like you've got plenty of lawsuits ahead of you here. Mr. Mayor, we just have about 15 seconds. Have you heard from the president? What's he saying right now?
I talked to the president just a few minutes ago. He's very, very upset at this rampant fraud. We don't have to go looking for this fraud, ma'am. They call us. We don't have enough telephone lines to deal with the amount of fraud, including software irregularities by Dominion. which are now beginning to grow beyond Antrim County. And I would say any place that used that software is a place in which the vote is seriously in doubt. If it can flip 2-1 overnight by mistake, then what kind of software is this?
Yeah.
And it isn't even American. It comes from Canada.
Yeah, well, you're asking the questions. Any chance the president's watching Newsmax right now?
I would say there's a very good chance the president is watching. The president's also very upset that over the weekend, except for Newsmax, people are saying there's no evidence has been produced. You know, we've been producing evidence, and you've been putting it on since the day after the election. The chief inspector in Philadelphia came out the day after the election and explained the fraud that was going on there.
I know.
And gave
you
50 individuals. We've been producing a mountain of evidence, and the fake news is conducting the same censorship they conducted with the Hunter Biden criminal laptop.
Well, we could talk to you all day, Mr. Mayor. We appreciate you taking the time this morning. Always a pleasure. And keep us updated,
we're headed to
of
court,
course.
And
I know.
We'll get a fair hearing.
All right. You'll keep us updated. Rudy Giuliani, thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, our Monday regulars, Joe DeGenova and Victoria Tunzing, are both part of the Trump legal team working to dispute the results of this election. So much to talk about. They are joining us live for the entire third hour of National Report, starting at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So stay tuned for that. And this.